Here comes the part now that some of you may not have done before, but it's really, really simple. We're going to put on our facing here. The first thing to do with the facing is to serge it at the lower edge here so that it's really neat. Alternatively, you could put binding on it and that'll look really, really nice as well. And then we're going to sew it on. And now comes the part that a lot of people don't know, and maybe it's new to you too. So what you want to do is you want to sew your facing to the facing of the back. Then when this is folded back, it will sit perfectly on the neckline. See? And it's super clean. On the other side we do the same. We pin it to the edge. There we are. Roll it back here, and then it will fit beautiful to the neckline, right? So first step is to go over to the sewing machine and sew on our facings. Now comes the exciting part. We're gonna roll this back like I've just shown you along the snip. I'm going to have the seam allowance facing into the facing here. You could also iron it apart or into one direction and then top stitch this down so that you get a neat edge, especially if you are using a zigzag stitch for this and it's not looking so nice. I'm doing it like you would do it in industry. I'm just pinning it there. We do the same on the other side. Now I'm also going to put the facing on the front here, the center front. Line it all up nicely all the way around. Really isn't hard to do. And we're going to do all of this with a foot width seam allowance. You can do it with 1 centimeter. I've worked it out for 1 centimeter, but actually when it came to doing it, I was thinking, well, I'd like it to be as wide as possible here, and actually I'm only going to do foot width, so whichever you prefer. Now all we have to do is sew once around and we're done with our collar. Lock in your stitches at the beginning, and we're working with a foot width seam allowance, very slowly working our way around. Stitch length should be 2.5. And you can put the needle down into the fabric as well and then lift the presser foot if you need to slightly turn it. And then we go round. Try to actually push the fabric into the presser foot a little bit so that you don't end up stretching anything. It's highly unlikely anyway, but that's how you should work your way all the way around. When you get to the end, don't forget to lock in your stitches again. Now I have sewn it in. All I need to do now is to cut back the seam allowance. I'm not going to cut it back too much because I'm also going to understitch it, but we're going to cut it back a little bit. It's actually easier if you cut it from this side, so you have the scissor on the right. Now I'm going to understitch the whole thing. Understitching means that I sew my seam allowance to my facing. What that will create is a lovely roll for my collar, and all this little bit extra we put in will then sit beautiful against the bodice, and it will not do this. We're going as close as we can to the start of the collar, and I think just there or where the facing starts is a good point, and we work our way all the way around. We're stitching close to the edge with a stitch length of 3, not quite as small as you would otherwise use for your normal seam stitching, and then we work our way all the way around. It's a little bit thick where you get over the bow, but it's okay. You can see that what I was saying earlier about the bow needing to be really lightweight, because you have quite a lot of layers of fabric there on top of each other. And then don't forget to lock in your stitches at the end. Go as fast as you can go. If that's only to the start of the integrated facing, then that's okay as well. Now we can turn our integrated facing here and get this really clean result on the other side. And the collar should automatically, even without ironing, try to roll down to the blouse now, and you can see that here. So we won't have any of this flipping up because we extended the length of the upper collar a bit. So I'm going to pick out the corner here with a pin. Whoops, don't pull a thread. There we are, and you can see we've got a really nice area now that will overlap, and we can put our little dainty buttons in there. I'm using my sleeve ironing board for this, and I'm just putting my collar over the edge, and then I'm just going to iron it flat first. That's really, really important. You do not want to like fold the collar down and then do it. First we do it flat all the way around so that it sits really well, and then the collar will roll by itself anyway. And I'm also going to put a little bit of steam here in that area where we have got the little tie, so that that sits really beautifully. Now we're going to work the facing. Now I've overlocked mine or serged it, but you could have also just turned it over. That's what it says in your instructions, and I think I'm going to do that because it's going to be neater. Move over to your shoulder seam and then fold that in. You want the distance to be quite even all the way around. It looks really nice. It's really pretty actually. And then I can just stitch that down, and when the collar lies over it, you're not going to see it because it's right at the top there. Now I've just gone ahead and done it from the other side, and I would really recommend that you do the center here first and then work your way out to that side once you've done both sides. That's what I did here. Nice and even. If you put it down on your table, it's actually really easy to get in. Where you have a round, of course you might end up with it like a kink, so you know, be quite gentle when you put it under, and you get this beautiful finish. Every time I sew something, I come up with other ideas of how to do it because there's so many ways to roam, and obviously with a facing here you could also just add a bit of binding to the edge, and you will see that on your blouses, not just some binding coming out there. And although you can do that, in industry they have specialized machines for it, so it always looks tidy, and I really worry that it wouldn't be very tidy if we did it on a household machine. So if you can't sew all that well yet, I think it would be very risky. So this is what it looks like done. Yay. All we have to do now is to stitch this all the way around close to the edge. A few points to remember when you're doing it, and I'm just going to do it here wrong at the start so that you can see that this is not easy. If you try to place your fabric like this so you have it fairly straight, about 5 or 6 centimeters down, feeding in, you end up with little pleats on the side. You want to make sure that your fabric is perfectly flat here, so you don't have to pull from the back. None of this. You put it on flat and you move the fabric around as it approaches your presser foot, and then is fed totally straight into the presser foot. When you go around curves, that's a really good tip. That is where I see people make most of the mistakes. When I was a teacher, I could see that all the time. So key is left hand. It flattens out the fabric, makes sure it's nice and smooth, and then the right hand feeds it round so that it then goes straight into the presser foot. This only applies to the first few centimeters. If you're around a curve, you can't have it all straight. Yeah, further down, if you try to do that, you end up with pleats in the fabric. And then as you come to the end, beautiful. Don't forget to lock in your stitches and make sure your stitch length for any top stitching is 3 or 3.5. Now we're going to iron it really well. First you iron your collar flat, that's really important. What you don't want to do is fold the collar over and then press on it straight away. That's not a very good idea. You want to just have some steam on there and then use your hand to flatten the collar a bit. You don't necessarily want to put the iron on it. Now I will have to say to this that because this is a blouse, you can put the iron on it. But if this was a jacket, a beautiful jacket where the collar needs to roll, then that would be the wrong thing to do. If you need to put the iron on a little bit in certain places, like where the bow is, just to get it nice and flat, that's fine. But it's a habit to get into, never to iron that crease of the collar in. And there it is, my beautiful collar. And you can see how that lies really flat, yeah? There's none of this standing up, because we've done all those steps, right? And we haven't actually put the iron on there like directly. We've just used a little bit of steam so the collar stays in that beautiful, slightly structural shape, that little bit of thickness. It looks absolutely stunning.